Joining me now is Alan Blinder of Princeton University. He is the author of After the Music Stopped, The Financial Crisis, The Response, and the Work Ahead. From Washington, David Leonhardt of the New York Times. His ebook is called Here's the Deal, How Washington Can Solve the Deficit and Spur Growth. I am pleased to have them both on this program. David, what's the headline coming out of Bernanke's press conference?
I think steady as it goes is the main headline. The Fed is going to continue to buy these bonds that it has been buying at about the same pace. It's going to continue doing it until it sees unemployment fall to about 6.5%. And so I don't think there are any huge changes today. But I think the most interesting part of the news conference was maybe when Bernanke was asked about whether he wants to continue on in the job. His term as chairman expires in February. And although he refused to answer the question, he said that he and President Obama had spoken about it, quote, a bit. And I think it's interesting to think about the idea that he and Obama have talked about whether he wants a third term and perhaps whether how inclined Obama is to give it to him.
I would think that if Obama's talking to him about it, it suggests that Obama would like for him to continue.
Yeah, I think that's a good assumption. I think Obama clearly likes Bernanke and thinks that on the whole Bernanke has done a good job. Bernanke has made the same main mistake that Obama has made, which is underestimating the depth and length of this economy. In some ways, the strongest argument for Obama to replace him is a partisan argument. There have been Republicans in this job now for more than 20 years, and I think Democrats may not want the Fed chairman job to be something that is seen as a Republican job. Now, Bernanke is, of course, being criticized much more by Republicans than by Democrats at this point, but he still is originally a Republican, and there are several Democrats, including Tim Geithner, including Larry Summers, including Janet Yellen, including Mr. Blinder, who would be very serious candidates for this job if Bernanke were to leave it.
Your thoughts, sir?
You know, the scuttlebutt from everybody is that he'll probably have enough after 8 years. I do believe that if he wants a third term and he asks the president for it, he'd probably get it. For the reasons David said, he's done a very good, never mind personal, never mind Republican. He's just done a very good job. And as David said, he's gotten Republicans a lot angrier than Democrats, even though he came into this job as a Bush appointee from the Republican side. So I think if Bernanke's an 8-year chairman, it'll be of his volition rather than Obama saying, you know, it's time for you to go so I can put in a Democrat.
Has he made decisions you disagree with?
Yes, and he knows. I disagreed very fundamentally with the Lehman Brothers decision, which I think it certainly wasn't the cause of the crisis. We had the crisis before, but it was really a turning point, and everything sort of just fell apart after Lehman. We've talked about it. He knows that I disagree with that.
What's their answer to that question?
His basic answer is, the answer has changed a few times, but the basic answer is we didn't have the legal means.
Right. That's what
there was no TARP, there was no Dodd-Frank.
Yeah.
They now have the legal means to handle the next Lehman, so to speak, differently. But his view was that they didn't have the legal means to do it.
The problem with that, have the legal means to do some of the things they actually did do, and when they really wanted to do it, they found the legal means. So I think that answer from them is not fully satisfying, although it's not completely unreasonable.
No. What's his theory of the case of the economy today and what's necessary to bring down unemployment? Because he seems to me to have made unemployment his principal target.
Yes. I think the theory of the case is largely two pieces. One, to the point you're just making, Charlie, the Fed is given by Congress a dual mandate, two responsibilities: keep inflation low, keep unemployment low. It's getting A+ on keep inflation low. It's getting D- on keep unemployment low. So that's a big piece of his case. That's why we need to concentrate on getting the unemployment rate lower than it is. Second part of the case is that, and you alluded to this before, as did David, that this economy seems sort of plagued with chronic weakness. Every time it seems to be getting off its knees, something else happens. By the way, the something else that's happening now is fiscal restraint, austerity, if you want to use that word. I thought the most interesting thing in this statement was an added clause about how fiscal policy is becoming more restrictive, which is a true statement. And I think he's now that's one of the headwinds that Bernanke and the Fed majority are fighting, ironically, our own government.
David?
That's absolutely true, and the comparison to prior decades is really striking. We ran a chart in the Times several weeks back in which we compared government employment after this recession to government employment after other recessions. In the early 1980s under Ronald Reagan, in the early 1990s under George H.W. Bush, and then Bill Clinton, government employment was growing. And in this recession, it's fallen. The difference is probably about 1 million jobs relative to what it had done in the past and now. So we're missing 1 million government jobs relative to historical norm.
Now, what's the difference? Why is that true?
It's true for two reasons. One is that states and localities almost inevitably have to cut back when times are tough. They lose tax revenue. They are often mandated legally to run a balanced budget. And so at the same time that consumers and businesses are pulling back, the government begins to. And then in Washington, at the federal level, starting in 2011, with these negotiations between the House Republicans and the White House, the House Republicans have insisted on big cuts, and they've often won some pretty substantial cuts. And that's why we've had austerity, and we're going to have more austerity this year.
If the Fed wanted to reduce unemployment from 7 to whatever it is now, to 7, could they do that? Do they have the tools to do that?
No, I don't think so. They're down to incremental policies. I think they know that. Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen and others are constantly arguing, correctly, I think, but they tend to put the best face on it they can, that we still have effective policy instruments. We can still give the economy a boost. But you're talking in the decimal place of the growth rate. There is nothing left in the Fed's arsenal, I don't think, and I don't believe the Fed really thinks, that could, say, add 0.5 point to the growth rate. That's not that much, 0.5 point to the growth rate. In the old days, when the Fed had a much fuller arsenal that wasn't all depleted, it would be easy to imagine the Fed adding 2 percentage points to the growth rate.
Are you surprised that I've had people here, smart people, come and say, it'll be a long time before the U.S. economy gets back at a 4% growth rate?
No, I'm not surprised. We've shown no sense of that. At the very beginning of the recovery, we got to some 4% numbers. We even hit a 5, but it got revised down. But it didn't last long. And frankly, we've had very few quarters since the early stages of this recovery that had a 3 even as the first digit, never mind a 4. So 4 looks like a big stretch, but you're right to use a number like that. Like in previous recoveries, beating 4 was considered a piece of cake. I mean, if you didn't beat 4, you were nowhere.